Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the Pundits Panel, the people who put pun into pundits. Remember, this is a spin-off from our other series, The Masked Cricketer, which has raised over £6,500 for the Lord's Taverners. And as you can see, I've put it down the bottom there. Scribing down the bottom is our Just Giving page for the Masked Cricketer. And if you so wish, want to give a donation during or after the show tonight, please do so. Go to the Just Giving page and search the Masked Cricketer. We also desperately want you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is www.youtube.com/C/The Masked Cricketer. Go and subscribe there. You'll see all our previous episodes of both The Masked Cricketer and the Pundits Panel. All good fun, lots of cricket information, some really good insight into cricket throughout those episodes. So please do go and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you possibly can. Obviously, I feel a little bit like David Dimbleby tonight, so we've got some special guests, and of course it would be remiss of me not to introduce, of course, my normal person who keeps things professional. Well, that's what he tells me, and it's a welcome, of course, to K-Dog. Good evening.
Hello.
And also to our resident stato, Wesley Spearman. There's Wes. How are you, Wes?
Bit under the weather at the moment, but besides that, pretty good.
We've got a few like that tonight. Apparently. So, yes, wow, without further ado, I am going to introduce to you, first from down under, a previous Masked Cricketer. A good evening, or a good morning, should I say, to Jim Maxwell. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Very well. Beautiful sunny spring morning here in Sydney. Just gone past 6:30 local time, and we're warming up, hopefully, for a cricket season at some point during the next, I don't know, couple of months. In Sydney, I think we're talking early November that they're going to start playing local cricket, club cricket. But everything's out there, hoping that another spike in the pandemic doesn't arrive before then.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll keep our fingers crossed for cricket there. And obviously, we may talk about the Ashes later on this evening. So welcome to you, Jim. We're also now pleased to introduce George Dobell from ESPNCricinfo. Good evening, George. How are you? I know you're a bit under the weather as well, I believe.
Yeah, okay. Yes, but I've been terribly brave about it, so you never know.
It's that man flu. It's man flu, isn't it? That's what it is. No, welcome to you both. We are waiting on Daniel Norcross from TMS. He hasn't actually managed to get onto our streaming as yet, but we will introduce Dan as and when he is able to join us. I think, the first thing I want to talk to you about is obviously the Old Trafford Test that never was. We've had people on social media, Michael Vaughan, citing that, don't tell me the test was cancelled for any other reason but the IPL. Very disrespectful to the fans, he said. Nasser Hussain, I have to applaud the players. There will be a lot of anger, and I get that. But the players going from bubble to bubble, quarantine to quarantine, is difficult. He cited the Ben Stokes scenario and explained the tight bubble is no longer sustainable. Tom Harrison said, it's not COVID related. It's the mental health of one team. This is not an issue created by the rescheduling of the IPL. I do not believe that for a second. So I'll come to you first, Jim. What was your thoughts of what unravelled at Old Trafford last week?
Well, I'm not as well informed as George or Dan might be, or any of you, because I'm a bit far from the action. But it does have a taste of IPL becoming a bit of a currency in the game, as much as the white ball has become the regular currency. that everyone is more interested in a potential clash in the end.
Little bit of buffering from down under there, Jim. While we're trying to get that sorted, George, what was your take on what happened last week at Old Trafford?
Well, first of all, I think it's really unfortunate to call a game off less than 2 hours before the toss, and I think it is hugely disrespectful to supporters. People were arriving not knowing, people have booked hotels, people have booked trains. There were some decent reasons for calling that game off, but they were decent reasons 24 hours earlier. So there's no reason why it couldn't have happened the previous day. I think that a lot of countries would have been reluctant to play once they had the number of cases in the camp. I don't know how much the fear of COVID was I genuinely don't know. That's not to be pouring scorn on it. I don't know how much the fear of COVID was a decisive factor. It seems that that's been there throughout. People in that tour party had caught COVID over the course of the trip. They had largely got on with it. I think the fact is that a 6-day quarantine period had been before going back to the UAE, and people were worried about missing out in the IPL. To deny that the IPL was a factor also seems to be disingenuous. Equally, though, you have to remember that the BBL was probably a factor when England pulled out of, some of England's players wanted to pull out of the South Africa tour, as was spending Christmas with their families and all those sorts of things. So there had been precedent set earlier. The really unfortunate is that it happened at sort of 8:44, was it, on the morning of the game. It could have happened 24 hours earlier, and it would have been a lot less disrespectful. But ultimately, I suspect that money talks very loudly in all sport now, and the IPL timing is not a coincidence.
No, absolutely. I mean, there was talk, wasn't there, that this Test match, they didn't want it as late or as close to the IPL, and there was some talk between the BCII and the ECB, but they went with the 5 Test match series. Do you think they could have gone with a 4 Test match series and just reduce time scale? Would that have been something that was acceptable?
Sure. I mean, yeah, if you do it several months out, what isn't acceptable is to change your mind to the morning of a game. So, and there are faults on every side there, because it seemed pretty obvious that some of the India players were insistent the day before that they didn't want to play, they were uncomfortable playing, and that they probably weren't listened to. And I think it is relevant, and it will become a very important moment in the sport. And it's relevant to the conversation I think we're having later about the Ashes, is that it's proved a reminder to the cricket's administrators that player power is terrifically strong. And I think that the ECB hierarchy had a moment of clarity that day as well. And they have probably changed their view about what is possible going into the Ashes series.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the situation with the sort of scheduling of English first-class cricket with also the 100 and the Vitality Blast. I had this thought when we did a Pundits Panel a few weeks ago about having the 50-over competition as a like an FA Cup competition. So it's a knockout phase, bring the national counties involved in that. So there's a real sort of underdog scenario that would reduce that particular competition. But would that then, dilute something that we've won a World Cup in? It's just a thought I had, and obviously then the Vitality Blast could still be in group stages. But what's your thoughts on the sort of scheduling of cricket in our country at the moment?
Well, obviously it's a mess. It's chaos. Clearly it is, and there are challenges with almost whatever you suggest. I mean, the idea of the FA Cup, while I like the idea of a knockout competition, preferably involving national counties, you could have a situation where a professional cricketer tried to get into the World Cup squad, for example, plays 150 over game a season then, couldn't you? Which doesn't seem really acceptable. Equally, though, now you can have a situation where they don't play any. So whichever way you look at it, it's a bit of a mess. We know that the priority has been money and short-term money grabbing, and that is how we've arrived at this situation. The irony of that is that the Test cricket has continued to pay the bulk of the bills in England for a long time, and it's that the ECB are compromising the future of that format in their desire for new money and the 100 deal in particular, and that's inherently foolish. But people will be aware of all these arguments, and if you want a potential solution, because obviously it's facile to just sit here and criticise without offering solutions. I don't think you can play in blocks. I don't think windows work. I think as soon as you have a white ball window, you are prioritising white ball cricket. That's particularly relevant in England, where we laughably call summer lasts about 25 minutes in July or August. So we have to move away from a system where we have Championship cricket just played, near Christmas at either end of the season, and where we've prioritised the white ball game. I think we all understand the reasons for that, but I think we've tried that now and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's trying to get that red ball game in the county championships around the Test match series would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? And obviously it is very, very difficult to do with the very tight windows that we have in our country. Jim, welcome back. Sorry, we had a little bit of a problem there down under with technology. We've just sort of spoken a little bit about the problem that occurred at the Old Trafford last week. You were saying about the IPL. What else did you want to say about that situation?
Well, I could hear your conversation. I'm sorry I dropped off. It's something to do with the carrier pigeons or whatever down under. But we seem to be sticking a little wobbly here, but let's hope it continues. Well, yeah, it's pretty obvious if you start talking cricket in Australia with anyone who plays at the highest level, and I've mentioned this a few times. The currency basically in the world of cricket now is IPL. That is the major currency in cricket. That is where the money is. And it's only going to get bigger, and it's going to put more pressure on the scheduling of other cricket, even one-day cricket and T20 ICC organised events, because it's going to start up in the United States within the next 12 months from the sound of it. I think some Indian corporates and other corporates have got it all sorted so that we can have another 6-week window that we have to kowtow to. So that's potentially 12 weeks of the year for the IPL, and then you're trying to fit in everything else with all these other nations that are now coming in, as we're seeing these a profusion of qualifying matches going on at the moment, like that lovely one the other day between Cameroon and Uganda, where there were 4 mancats. So we're getting plenty of variety in the game, but we're getting a lot of it. And as George says, trying to balance the schedule is a nightmare. And at least Australia, if the season occurs, we're going to have the overlay.
We are really struggling with the technology down under. I apologise to anybody watching for that. Poor Jim. We'll have to get that carrier pigeon working a little bit harder. I know, Wes, we've had some questions coming in. We would like you to ask questions. You can do via YouTube and obviously our Facebook, but you can also go to Twitter, and you can use the hashtag TMC Pundits. So, Wes, I understand you've got a question for George.
More of a statement than a question than anything, but this comes from Felix Jones off YouTube. He said there has been a huge push in the recent years about mental health in sports, and I understand that players do need a break, but they called the game off way too late because obviously even the day before, India had those sort of negative PCRs. So, I mean, everyone sort of got the assumption that the test match was going ahead, and then less than 24 hours later, it was it was just called off. So, I suppose should there be sort of a buffer between having those negative tests, and because the public needs to know at the end of the day, it is the paying fans that, as George has said already, pay for trains, hotels, whatever else that needs to be. So should there be more communication, if anything, between the sort of the cricket boards and the spectators themselves?
Sorry, is that for me? Look, the questioner is right. There are legitimate reasons for calling games off, and you could argue that there were legitimate reasons here. I think there probably were, but not that late. Not that late. It was just disrespectful to supporters, but they couldn't give a toss about supporters. They honestly, you don't even enter the equation. I mean, but you know this. You know this from the moment you're fleeced for your £100 ticket, the moment you're fleeced for your £7 beer, the moment you're made to queue for hours for soggy sandwiches. They think you're replaceable, and particularly Test cricket supporters. So, yeah, the only thing that will ever make them listen is if supporters unite and demand to be listened to, but they won't otherwise. I don't even think it came into the equation, honestly. I was actually a bit surprised, not by all of them, but by one or two of the England players who it hadn't really crossed their mind. You know, oh yeah, it's bad for the supporters, I suppose. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, the idea that the Indian players were worried about the supporters in Manchester.
Yeah, understand. I'm coming to K-Dog because I understand there's some questions coming through to you as well. K-Dog, over to you.
Yeah, I've got one or two questions that have come through. One which I'll go to Jim with if technology holds, and then one for George. Jim, the question, and I know that it's something that sort of I've seen on some of your tweets that you're not 100% behind. The question that's come through from Daniel is the 100 competition, which we'll come on to later on. Do you think that basically cricket is being watered down too much, and there are too many formats, which will potentially lead to this sort of situation cropping up in the future, where essentially a team just pulls out of a game because of there being too many formats to play?
Sorry, is that for me or George?
Yeah, for you, Jim. Sorry, for Jim, yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't understand what's going on in English cricket. I mean, they're throwing a sop to the free-to-air audience. That's why they came up with 100. They have some more cricket on TV. I mean, English cricket stuffed itself in 2005 when it went with a big deal with Sky. I mean, you know, your national obsession when it comes to sport is, I think, called football. It is a bit in this country too, but cricket's still acknowledged as our major game. I don't think cricket is in England.
Yeah, the link keeps dipping out, so I'll go to George.
That, I suppose. It's no wonder the ECB are trying to come up with ways of getting more people involved in the game, and the 100's another bright idea, as it were. But I don't understand how the season works. It's just all over the place, and trying to sort of compartmentalise it as to the detriment of your mainstream. Test cricket wasn't played for what, a number of weeks? There's no county cricket in the middle. I mean, it's all over the place. So is ours, mind you, but I think we've got a little bit more control over the end game, as it were. As I was saying before, at least if this season happens, you're going to have an overlay of Test cricket and BBL, with the Test matches running through December into January while the BBL is starting. And even that, you know, is uncomfortable, because there's always cricketers on the periphery who are on the fringe of the Test team,
Yeah, no, I would agree with everything you said. Yeah, no, I would agree with everything you said there, Jim. George, for you, I don't know what your thoughts were on the 100. Basically being played right in the heart of the period where Test cricket is Test cricket is played in July, and we didn't have Test matches really, did we, from the New Zealand all the way through pretty much July, and that must be disappointing for traditionalists, I guess. Yes, the 100 brought in new supporters, and for the women's game it was fantastic. But what are your thoughts on the lack of Test cricket throughout the main summer month, particularly given how poor the summer's been weather-wise this year? For George.
Well, there's a lot there. Did the 100 bring in a new audience? Did it? I think that if you put cricket on a free-to-air platform, 20 overs, 100 balls, 50 overs, whatever, people will probably fall in love with it because it's a really good bloody game. And that's one of the good things that the 100 has shown, to be fair, that it's a very adaptable sport. So I enjoyed the 100 as a format. I actually thought the standard was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I just thought it was a hugely unnecessary risk, and the prioritization of it damaged other parts of the sport. So it's the collateral damage that concerns me. You talk about Test cricket, but I'd go back further than that. I would always say that if you want to have a strong international side, you have to get the domestic structure right, and actually everything else beyond that is a bit of a detail. That's sort of 90% of the job, I think. If the domestic game produces players, it's a lot easier. We don't have a domestic game that's doing that. We're not giving it a chance to do that. It's a completely different sport. If you face who's the top wicket taker this championship season, I think it's Luke Fletcher, who's a terrific cricketer. But if you face Luke Fletcher with a Duke's ball on a seaming wicket, and then you find yourself in Australia facing Hazelwood and Cummins, it's a different sport. It's a different game. That's not preparing you at all. So there are all these sorts of practical considerations. My other thing with the 100, it was just completely unnecessary. There was no reason that T20 shown free to air couldn't have worked. I think it's a great sport, and my other big issue with the 100 is I think it's an attempt to cut the number of counties by stealth. There are absolutely legitimate reasons for people to want to do that. I don't agree with them, but I accept that there are very well-meaning people who think there are too many counties. That's fine. But just be bloody honest about it, yeah? What the ECB have done, who it's in their constitution to protect the county system, is produce a competition which will, without doubt, undermine it, and already is. So there was quite a lot I resent about it, not least the idea that it's necessarily bringing in a new audience. I don't think the competition particularly brought in a new audience. I think putting cricket, taking it from behind a paywall for the first time in a long time, would be enough to have done that. So, and I think that, there's a lot of ludicrous stuff spoken about it. The idea that India are interested in introducing the 100. Why on earth would they potentially threaten the value of the IPL by bringing in a new competition? They would be insane to do that. Australia would be insane to do it. Ludicrous nonsense.
Yeah.
And then you remember that a lot of the people talking very positively about the 100, not everyone, but a lot of the people talking very positively about it are paid to do so, or they are beneficiaries. They are either being paid to play in the new competition. Great, good luck to them. They are journalists who are being paid to talk about the new competition, or they are administrators getting a big fat bonus for instigating the new competition. So I think you've got to take a lot of the hype and the propaganda about that competition with a pinch of salt. What I don't want to be is someone who's just saying it was all rubbish and terrible, because it wasn't. I thought it was quite good fun. And if you wanted to say, make the whole T20 Blast a 100-ball competition, personally, I'd be open-minded about that. But I didn't like it being an 18 competition. I didn't like it being prioritised. I thought the amount of money spent on it was absurd and wasteful. And whenever anyone tells you that's made a profit, they're lying. I promise you, they are lying, outright lying. It has made a whopping loss, and it will continue to do so next year, the year after, and the year after that.
I will come in there, George. I mean, it's really interesting what you're saying there. And I took my wife, actually, first time. We were going to a test match against New Zealand, but unfortunately COVID scuppered that for us. So we did go to Trent Bridge for one of the hundreds, and she really thoroughly enjoyed it. It was her first live cricket, so she was first experience of that. Now that could have happened in test match cricket. If I'd have taken her to test match, she could have still said that was
or T20 or T20.
Yeah, absolutely. 50
because I think just which game was it, out of interest?
That was the Trent Rockets versus Northern Superchargers. Was it Northern Superchargers?
Okay, because I did a couple of those games there, and I think that their results showed that the demographic of spectators was almost identical to their T20 spectators. Now they do T20 very well. Actually, they've got quite a good family audience. I would be reasonably positive that if you had taken her to a T20 match, she'd have enjoyed it equally. That's all. But great. They amazing what happens when the ECB take pride in a competition, market it, and allow people to buy tickets at a price that isn't exorbitant and put it on free-to-air TV. I mean, it's not rocket science.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I mean, it was £15 a ticket. It was 7 hours of entertainment. Where can you go for 15 quid for 7 hours of entertainment? So, from that perspective, I totally understand what you're saying as well. But it's just to put that out there. Kieran, I take it there's loads of questions coming in, both on YouTube and Facebook. Wes, over to you for the next question.
I've got to scroll through quite a few now. But this one more swaying away from the 100 and more towards the Ashes this time round. From Jim83 on YouTube, also to Jim Maxwell. What's your perspective on England likely bringing a ghost squad to Australia? Surely the broadcasters and public won't be very happy with that.
Well, any England team that comes without their best players, particularly Ben Stokes, and that's a big question mark, isn't it? Is going to be struggling, I would think. But, as I mentioned the other day, given the commercial realities of the game, Cricket Australia are going to lose a fortune if this Ashes doesn't proceed. So all the time we've got this overriding almost all decisions about whether or not to tour, as we've just seen with the abandonment of the Test match at Old Trafford. I mean, have the ECB got some kind of claim on their insurance? They want to think whichever way they can construct the semantics around the abandonment, cancellation, and postponement in Australia. Ashes is needed to present Australia's view just to by Channel 7, who are the host broadcast. I'm sure they want the best team. We all want the best team because a good series, but for various reasons around
it's really a struggle tonight, isn't it, for our Australian friend. Wes, another question for George, if you could, please.
Yeah, this one going back to sort of the scheduling, I suppose the 100 as well. And we'll focusing on next year, I suppose, from D. Franklin. When can England host an extra test and or 2 T20s next summer? Because, of course, India have offered to reschedule the test, but then they've also offered a couple of T20s, I think, sort of as a substitute as well. So could you see that happening next year?
Yes. I mean, I think that's probably the likely scenario because it avoids a really nasty squabble. It avoids the potential insurance claim. It avoids the ICC having to adjudicate. It's probably the compromise solution that they play a test, I guess, at Old Trafford, either side of the one-day series. But there are all sorts of issues with that. I mean, the calendar does not allow for extra space for these things. And equally, of course, India are sending a white ball squad and they want to play a test match. So they either play it before the series and go into it without adequate preparation, which England would probably love, or they play it at the end. But I think the day after the series finishes, they're meant to be in Antigua for a series against West Indies, who I'm sure, you know, it'd be very unfair to punish them for anything that's happened here in recent days. So, yeah, there's no perfect solution there. Do you want a prediction for the Ashes? I think that in recent days the ECB were quite struck by the strength of feeling from the players, and I think as a result of that they have firmed up in their stance against Cricket Australia, and that they will give Cricket Australia something of an ultimatum on the 26th, I think it is, of this month, and they will make demands about quarantine that Cricket Australia probably can't provide. They just aren't in a position to. Right. It's up to the government. And at that stage, I think it's really possible that England will just pull out.
I understand
but
that.
I don't see them. I don't see them putting up with the quarantine requirements. Cricket Australia originally suggested it would be a soft quarantine. Soft quarantine is really not very soft. It's 2 weeks in a hotel room with 2 or 3 hours out a day to exercise for the players. But it's not like that for the families. The families have to do hard quarantine. And I don't think the players, most of the players, want to put their families through that. So a week or so ago, there was definitely a possibility that there was going to be a collective stance from the England team, coaches, support staff, and they were going to say, all of us, we're not going. That was definitely talked about. I think they've moved on from that. I think they have, although it's still a possibility. And I think now some are prepared to go and some aren't. But very few of them are prepared to put their families through a hard quarantine. At that stage, what sort of team do you end up with? So it might be that England say, the ECB rather say, unless you can provide them some sort of guarantees about the quarantine they're going to go through. And to put it in perspective, these guys are living... so they would probably have to stay in a bubble throughout the series. So to justify them going from state to state without serving more quarantine periods. And you know, Jim will know this in more detail than me, but I think the chances of playing a test in Perth look slim at the moment. So there are all sorts of problems, and it's all very well saying push it back in the calendar, as a lot of people do. People say, you know, start on Boxing Day or whatever. I think Cricket Australia need to have this cricket on TV in December. I think that's pretty important to the broadcasters. So there are no perfect solutions.
Yeah, George, I'll ask this to both of you. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there, and Jim's mentioned it previously. This decision ultimately, whether there's an ultimatum or not, it's ultimately not Cricket Australia and not the ECB that will effectively drive the decision, but it's the Australian federal government, isn't it? I mean,
not just the federal government. That's the thing. All the state governments will have their own different views. So who is in a position to sort of make guarantees? And I don't know that anyone is. The difference there is, though, that the ECB had a closer relationship with the government, particularly in the English summer of 2020. So they were able to work with the government a lot more effectively to sort of provide some sort of assurances to the sides coming across. You know, the other thing that was key then, when Pakistan and West Indies in particular were undergoing pretty tough quarantine periods in sometimes quite modest hotels. I think Pakistan spent a couple of weeks in, or several weeks rather, in the Premier Inn and Derby, didn't they? I think one of the differences then that this was all quite new, and we didn't realise how long it was going to go on, and so people, you know, you can sort of take a deep breath and get on with it if you see an end date. But you know, is this the new reality? I mean, we don't know, do we? And they've just had enough of it, and I don't blame them. It's really rubbish. So there are all sorts of differences, but I think that is key, that Cricket Australia doesn't seem to have the same close relationship with either its broadcast partners or government officials, and maybe the federal state government relationship is also quite complex and political. So that's quite different, and provides really challenging backdrop to this. But as I say, I think September the 26th is a key date, and we will know quite a lot more quite soon after that.
I mean, I'm not sort of one for hyperbole at all, but would you say, I mean, none of us cricket supporters would want to see a watered down Ashes series with essentially an England second 11 only going to certain states. It wouldn't, in my view, it wouldn't be an Ashes series. Would it not just be a better option to actually accept the inevitable and push it back and see if it can be sort of pushed back into 2022? I know there's a long schedule ahead, but nobody wants a watered down Ashes. It's the pinnacle Test series in the world, isn't it? Everybody knows that.
Well, is it? I don't know. I'm not in a position to say. I don't know whether it's the pinnacle Test series. I don't think people from other countries think it is. Look, there's no room in 2022. I mean, England are meant to be all sorts of places. I mean, there's a series against Pakistan at the end of that year, isn't there? So what are we gonna? You saying England don't go to Pakistan? That doesn't seem ideal or fair. And the big thing you have to understand is the economy of cricket, and that is all built on the broadcast deals. If Cricket Australia don't get the Ashes played, they have a cataclysmic problem in front of them. Jim would be much better placed to talk about this, but it is a fundamental existential problem to them. So the idea that we are in a situation where there's an ideal solution, that's way gone. Would it be better to just get it played? I mean, it has happened before. Jim will have commented. Actually, sorry, I may be doing you a disservice, but it certainly will have watched those the Mike Brearley side thrash Australia 5-1, I think it was, in the late 70s, when Australia would basically play the second or third 11. So these things have happened previously, and we just got on with it. I don't know, maybe we're in that territory.
I was hoping that Jim was going to come in there, but I think he's frozen again.
But his face is actually putting it perfectly. If he's frozen on your screens the same way he is on mine, I think that says anything far better than I could ever manage.
That's probably 1,000 words, isn't it? To be fair, very good. Wes, they're flooding in these questions, aren't they? It's just brilliant, and thanks ever so much for everybody tuning in. And like I say, you can ask the questions through YouTube and Facebook, and obviously Twitter through #TMC Pundits. Wes, another question, please.
Yeah, another one about the Test cricket from Karan Govindia. Question to both Jim and George. Will English cricket lose followers in Test matches, at least post the big names? It will be much harder to sell Test cricket after sort of the Anderson, Root and Stokes all eventually hang up their boots. And do you have any ideas on how long Jimmy Anderson intends to play for?
Will it be harder? I think they said that when Gower and Gooch and both of them retired. New players come along, and capture our imagination. And there's no reason why, I don't know, Zach Crawley or Ollie Pope won't captivate in the same way. And, some of those guys, they've got a Root and Stokes, hopefully got another few years. I mean, who knows? Maybe Jimmy Anderson does too. How long does he intend to play? He's 39. So let's just, get it in perspective. We have to be near the end. And it won't necessarily be entirely his decision. But I do remember, right at the end of the last Ashes series, we were in the sort of bowels of the Sydney cricket stadium and cricket ground rather, and he said something along the lines of, obviously I won't come again, but actually I'm not sure I could bear for my last experience of Australia to be defeat. And we all sort of brushed it off at the time, but not many people retire right before an Ashes tour, and everything I understand suggests that he's mad for one more go at it. After that, who knows? I say again, he's going to be 40 in June? I mean, it's incredible, but he's already rewritten every history book and expectation. So, you'd be mad to write him off now, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Jim, I think
we're getting a tour of Jim's house now. I think he's back on. So
through the keyhole, isn't it? It's through the keyhole. I'm sure it is.
I changed my modus operandi here, so I'm on the main frame in another part of the place. So I hope it lasts more than 20 seconds. I'm sorry, it's been a very fractured performance from down under, but that's what you're going to get, unfortunately, in a federation that's got a number of republics, as George has alluded to. This is not about one government running the country. It's about the secessionists in Western Australia doing their thing, about Mrs. Palachuk in Queensland. As Gideon Haigh has described, we live in a country of border closures and petulant premiers. And as a result of that, it's very difficult to organise anyone to come to this country. We can't even get 50,000 of our own citizens back in the country because there are no flights to come here and all sorts of ludicrous quarantine regulations. But that's what it is. And that's what Cricket Australia are trying to deal with at the moment in making sure the Ashes go ahead. And that's why there's a big question mark about it being staged. And you mentioned postponing it to next year. I mean, actually, and you know what's happening in October, November next year in Australia? It's the WT20. The real one is taking place here. This one coming up in Dubai, I mean, that's just a replacement, isn't it, for the Champions Trophy? So, I mean, the schedule just kills you all the time if you're trying to manoeuvre and replace, postpone matches or put series off. And as George has mentioned, the challenge for Cricket Australia is massive. I mean, it cost them a fortune last year to get India around the country and stage the series, which was a fantastic series, of course. But they're going to have to go through the same thing with England. And at the moment, we've got the Indian women up in Queensland because Queensland have agreed to allow them to come in and, again, they've had to be quarantined before their series against Australia. So is this what we're going to end up with this summer? Playing Test cricket in one or two states, not playing in 5 different places? There's so much up in the air in terms of where this is going because the rules of play keep changing depending on the attitude of state governments. So this is the problem we've got at the moment. And sitting here talking about it's all very well, but it's not solving the problem. And it's just an ongoing problem. We can't even be sure of a start to our Sheffield Shield season, which is supposed to be about to happen. But, the New South Wales players can't go to the Northern Territory and all sorts of stuff. It's crazy. We live in a very crazy country, and federation is looking like a bad idea at the moment.
Jim, you're in a much better position broadband-wise. We heard all of that. That was fantastic. I was very much put in my place by George quite rightly when I said that it was a personal view, really, that the Ashes is the pinnacle for most in world cricket. I'm sure that the BCCI and other countries around the world would completely disagree. What's your gut feeling though, Jim? I know we've got a little bit of time to wait. Do you think that the Ashes in any form, any format is going to go ahead this year? A gut feeling from somebody like the good Sal.
Well, if I put on another cap, and I don't have one here at the moment to put on, but I'm also editor of the ABC Cricket magazine now. You can imagine the problems there. Commissioned all sorts of people to write pieces about the forthcoming Ashes series. Are we actually going to be able to publish this thing? Will there be anything to talk about? So there are so many unknowns at the moment. We live in a state of perennial hope, optimism that the things will improve. And certainly in New South Wales, we're getting the promise that this lockdown that we've had going since June, which means, effectively, like, I can't have a haircut, will be relaxed in the next month, and we'll be able to get back to a more normal way of proceeding. But, nothing's certain, particularly the way things are administered in this country. So I'd like to think we're going to have some sort of Ashes series, but goodness knows how many players, families will want to come if these restrictions continue to be imposed in the way they are at the moment. Cricket Australia would be they'd be sent to the cleaners. I mean, they've already had Channel 7 up them for getting a bad deal since the deal started, and there was threat by the change of CEO to take them to court because they weren't getting a decent product to put on TV. And now if there's no product, you can imagine the cost of that exercise. So are we just going to have a Sheffield Shield season with BBL? Is that what we're looking forward to? We sit here in an absolute state of not knowing what's about to occur this season. It's the same all over the country at whatever level of cricket you look at. And I don't know how they manage the summer in England, but, we're now faced, just because I'm also involved in club cricket here in Sydney, pushing back the start of the season and all sorts of issues about whether or not you need to be double vaxxed to play, to coach, to be at the ground. That there are so many requirements imposed on people that it's a nightmare to try and sort through it to make it all work. So that's. I'm sorry, I can't give you any definite answer about these things, but that's the state of play at this moment. And there are a lot of people at Cricket Australia running around in circles talking to politicians, to health officials, the ECB, to try and sort this out. But at the moment, as I think George has explained, it's all on an edge. And it would be no surprise if there's no resolution to the position that governments are taking in this country in regards to quarantine. But I'd hate to think it's going to happen, that the whole thing gets shelved. But it's got to be a possibility, yeah.
I think it's a situation that's really reminiscent. I'm sure Darryl will agree with me. Really reminiscent of going back to the start of the pandemic when it first sort of broke. The pandemic was upon us. That season for England and English cricket in general was decimated. And it just seems like it's gone full circle, and it's now sort of likely looking like decimating cricket in Australia. I think we can move on from the Ashes for now. There's some really good questions coming in. We've got a lot of viewers on YouTube tonight. This is brilliant to see. I think Mr. Norcross has gone AWOL. He maybe stuck his traffic. I believe he might have been covering a game this evening and was going to join us, and possibly is still stuck somewhere on a motorway. So he may still join us because he has been renowned for being late on parade before. But Wes, there's a really important question that's come in, isn't there? And I think that it's really personal and relevant to all of us on the panel, and it's something that's really close to all of our hearts. And I'll ask you to put this one to the panel, Wes.
Yeah, so this one is from Paul Williams, also on YouTube. And I think, George, you've been heavily involved in the situation at Yorkshire with Azim Rafiq. Paul's question is, what will be the next step in the ongoing saga of racism at Yorkshire County Cricket Club? Will they be punished, and what will that punishment be?
I have to play a long game on this story because the process is going to be long and drawn out, but it is inexorable at this stage. And yes, there will be punishment. So if you want to know what next steps are, I mean, the judge in Azim's employment tribunal compelled Yorkshire to hand over the unredacted report before October the 8th, I think it is. And he has to hand it over to Azim, and he has to hand it to, Yorkshire have to hand it to Azim, and they have to hand it to the judge. They still haven't given it to the ECB, which is a remarkable thing. And I sort of understand why, because I've seen the evidence. I haven't seen the completed report, but I have seen the evidence. And yeah, I understand why they don't want anyone to see it. But I'm quite certain that, I mean, you know, as I think I reported, haven't I, that Azim has had a legal threat or two in the last week or two. I'm absolutely sure they would like to issue one against me as well. So I'm going to take the long game, but play the long game. But I'm absolutely sure that the net is closing, and that those who need to be flushed out of the sport are going to be.
Well, let's hope so, because what happened to it?
Just on that, on the report, by the way, let's just put in perspective something about the report that everyone's saying. Publish the report. Let's see the report. The report, independent report, paid for by Yorkshire, people appointed by Yorkshire to run it, will be redacted by Yorkshire's lawyers. This report is one step. It is fascinating that they basically marked their own homework and still failed. There's something pretty amiss at Yorkshire cricket, and has been for a while. And it will take more involvement from more people than a Yorkshire appointed panel. Well-intentioned though I think all those people were, that is not my definition of independence. But I think that it's very encouraging that enough people from sort of a political background are now involved, and I suspect that you'll hear them become more vocal in the weeks to come. And yeah, you bet there are some people named in that report who are extremely uncomfortable, and they should be. But there's a different thing there between what happened historically and what is relevant now, because it's not about revenge. You know, Azim's been very strong in maintaining this focus that it's not about that, it's about change. And you have to understand everything that he's been through. It's been remarkable to work with Azim Rafiq. It's been a real pleasure. It always is lovely when someone trusts you enough to tell them your story and you sort of get close to them. But you have to remember that he's lost a kid. Yeah? He's lost his career. He's sort of lost his identity. He is a very bright, he's very intelligent, personable, damaged man. And one of the things I most admire about him is his focus and desire to ensure that other people don't have to go through similar pain. And he is really committed to that. He's been incredibly isolated at moments during this episode. It is incredible that he's won. And he, you know, bar all the shouting of detail, he has won, because this is coming out, and it feels like a bit of a crossroads moment in the sport. It really does. And there are lots of people at Yorkshire who have been terribly honourable and good and come out of it very well, and it would be nice to be able to tell that story as well. But also there has been a culture, I think, where people have tried to turn the other way. People haven't done enough. People haven't taken it seriously, and they still don't understand. They don't get it, what they've done. And the fact that they're not handing the report to the regulator, you know, to the ECB, is an absolute scandal. And the ECB, you know, I'm fairly convinced that their intentions in this are honourable and good. They've given Yorkshire every opportunity, but right now is probably the time to show some teeth. And there is talk that they could charge Yorkshire with bringing the game into disrepute, I think probably now is the time to do it, because if they don't, maybe the ECB are doing it. You know, how long could we wait? It was September the 2nd when I ran that first, September the 2nd, 2020, when I ran that first piece with Azim. Not that it was the first piece, there have been pieces 2 weeks previously. Yorkshire have been dragged kicking and screaming into doing anything, let alone the right thing. And I think that, you know, impatience is a virtue sometimes, and that we've probably given them long enough.
Okay, well, there's another question. But moving on, I think it was possibly more pertinent for Jim. Jim, the Afghanistan issue and the situation there, obviously, with the situation in Afghanistan at the moment, and Australia suggesting that they won't be playing Afghanistan given that the Taliban will not support women's cricket. The right decision, clearly, in my opinion, is absolutely right. So your views on that?
Well, I think in the short or longer term, whatever you want to call it, it's out of Cricket Australia's hands. I'd be very surprised if the Australian government allowed the team to come to Australia in the current situation. I mean, everything's a bit sort of semi-grey, if I can put it that way, in terms of what is the official position in Afghanistan. You know, there's clearly been a hiatus there with a change of government. I mean, is the government formally in power now? Someone's come out with a statement the other day about the situation regarding the ongoing the condition of women playing cricket, or women doing anything in that society, from the sound of it. So we kind of fear the worst, and I don't know whether the ICC are moving towards having a discussion on this before this T20, because at the moment they seem to have just pushed it to one side, and in the hope that things may be a bit more sorted as we move into November, and that'll give Afghanistan the opportunity of playing. But yeah, all things being equal, of what we're hearing about the attitude of the Taliban with strict Sharia law and the rest of it, the position regarding women in their society is just horrendous. And we actually had someone who was involved in Afghanistan women's cricket on Stump, the BBC Stump last night, who was able to say what she rather forthrightly said about the situation in Afghanistan, because she's left the country. And she wouldn't be saying that, I imagine, if she was still living there. But it's a very grim situation in so many ways. And I would imagine that Afghanistan at some point are going to be on the outer in terms of their men's team playing cricket. And certainly I can't see any way that there's going to be a change of attitude here, as sort of self-righteous as it may appear to be, the way Cricket Australia have reacted to all this, for there to be a change in a test match to take place in Hobart. And it's actually a strange situation in this country. One of the better places to be living at the moment is old Van Diemen's Land, Tasmania, because it's not attached to the island, the bigger island, and they're that they could actually secede and have an Ashes series of their own down there, because they don't have the constrictions that a lot of the rest of us have at the moment. But yes, it would have been wonderful for them to get a test match, and for Afghanistan obviously to play against Australia as a nice little entree to the Ashes series. But I can't see how that's going to happen.
One of only 2 grounds in Australia that I have visited was Hobart, that on the MCG. That's a beautiful big ground. Yes, lots of other questions coming in. With got a couple more. One about the ODI. The format. So, Wes, over to you. George has some answers on it. You're coming through loud and clear now. It's absolutely fantastic. It's like we're in the next room, which is great too.
Well, at least Jim's coming through loud and clear. We can barely hear you, K-Dog. Moving on. This one from Neil V to both Jim and George. Rather than reduce the amount of cricket played, will you instead expect cricket boards around the world to have more specialisation between formats and have sort of specific T20 side, ODI side, and Test side? Could you perhaps see that happening in the near future, long future?
Well, yeah, I mean, it sort of is, isn't it? But you could also understand why they don't want it to happen, because there's a real danger the best players will only play the most lucrative format of the game, which might become T20. I don't know that it is at the moment, by the way. You know, the England players' central contracts are very, very lucrative. I think that's the same with Australia. Yeah, I think there'd be a lot of benefit in that. That's one of the reasons why I wouldn't be picking Josh Butler in the Test side, because he's, you know, a great white ball player, and it maybe dilutes his value in both formats by trying to make him do too much. It's desperately hard. You would think, sadly, that Jofra might not have a future as a Test player. I mean, you know, I hope he does, but you would understand it if he comes back and tries to and doesn't want to risk his body by playing long form cricket. It'd be completely understandable. So whether it's a choice for the boards to be making or the individual players, I don't know, but I think we're sort of seeing that happen already, but very, very often the best players are the best players across formats. Not always. There are lots of examples of people who specialise, but you know, you want Ben Stokes in your 50 over side, certainly, and your Test side, don't you?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation here. I mean, we've got a very well rewarded central contract system here, and the top players are earning very good money. Let me give you a situation. As you know, Australia went to West Indies and Bangladesh with an understrength side for any number of reasons. Yes, legitimately there were some injuries, kept players like Steve Smith out, nursing that injury. There are other people, dare I say my namesake, who chose not to go. Spurious reason. I think he was looking at the IPL. He's already in trouble with his own state, Victoria, about the upcoming season because of his splintering allegiances, it seems. And I'm going to throw a name in here who really gave his all, and I know he is really annoyed with the lack of commitment of people who are contracted big money to play for Australia who just withdraw their labour because they're going to go and play IPL. This has got to stop. I'm talking about Nathan Lyon. Nathan Lyon backed up and he played throughout the summer. He played Sheffield Shield. He was a leading bowler in Sheffield Shield cricket. He even played domestic stuff. He played all this. He doesn't play white ball cricket for Australia at the moment. He's over there because Zampa's preferred. I know he's pretty annoyed with the attitude of a number of his teammates, he wouldn't say that publicly, about not putting their hand up and wanting to play. And if you're under contract to play for Australia and being paid big money, you should damn well play unless you've got an injury. And players will cite bubble wash and the rest of it as a reason for their poor mental health, if that's the case. So we've got these ongoing issues here, and we're going to have to rethink, I reckon, the way we have our top players contracted. Maybe we should only have 4 or 5 contracted, and the rest can go and sort themselves out because they've got so many deals going with other competitions other than their duty of care to their country, if I can describe it that way. So, but this is the state of the game. You know, more and more players will become mercenaries, and you know, cricket boards are going to have to say, well, if that's the state of play, sorry, you're not having a contract any longer, or you're going to have a half-part contract and a match fee or whatever it might be. We keep coming back to the same argument about so much of this game, unfortunately, and it all comes back to money. The money that comes from broadcasting, which goes around the pipe and back to the players to reward them. And so it goes. And everything's getting more confused and congested. And on top of that, we've got, as I mentioned, the overlay of the disruptor called COVID. So it's a very unhealthy, unpredictable situation in so many ways at the moment. But the least of it is that you want your best players to be playing for the country if you can achieve it. And in terms of where England sit, even if everything was equal, what is England's best 11? Is it Ben Folkes with the gauntlets in a test match? I've been watching cricket for a long time, and England go through these moments in their history where they pick a bloke who can bat and hold the gloves. They don't pick a bloke because he's the best wicketkeeper. I go back to Jim Parks, John Murray, that little one years ago. Alex Stewart, was he always the best wicketkeeper? They've had some good ones, Knott and Taylor. Anyway, there are lots of discussion points around what is occurring in the game, and what we want is there to be some kind of transparency and level playing field for it all to occur. And this COVID thing is a massive disruptor in so many ways to scheduling, the players' mental health, their attitude to wanting to play the game at all. And, you know, Christmas is around the corner and players want to be spending time with their families. I understand that. So there we go. I'm not answering anything at the moment, I suppose, in this conversation, because I think I'm as confused as the people who are running cricket now.
Well, I'm not sure that you're aware. We've told a lot of people on our channel before, Jim. Darren and I coach county side, and for us, we would always look to pick, in terms of a wicketkeeper, it's a specialist position. We would always look to pick the best wicketkeeper. This year we've not really been able to do that every week, but most of the time we have. We had a game actually on Sunday where we picked a 15-year-old lad who's a specialist wicketkeeper, and he performed beautifully behind the stumps, and it was a joy to see. And actually, I'm a big advocate, Jim, for a specialist wicketkeeper. It's a specialist position, isn't it? And it's you know, Jack Russell, I think, was the last true proper specialist, legendary wicketkeeper for England. And I would always go down that route. And Ben Folkes, for me, once he's fit, he also, in my opinion, is every bit as good a batter, you know, at test level as the two that have been sharing the gloves recently. George, I'm just going to move on to a question that's come in from a lady who is called Julie. It's a really good question. It's talking about the Royal London Cup, which was the 50-over competition this year, which very much got pushed into the sidelines with the 100 and all the other competitions as well. She's asking, do you think that there were some positives there in terms of the fact that they were well supported, they were live streamed, and it gave opportunity for some young talent to actually get that opportunity to play some relatively high level competition cricket?
Up to a point. I did write about this a couple of times. I mean, opportunity is a funny word, isn't it? It sounds like a really good thing. I don't think it's unmitigatedly positive. I saw a game. I mean, I saw some really good 50-over cricket. I saw a game at Guildford that was a lot of fun. It felt like it was packed. I think there were 3,000 in. You know, it's a small ground. It was drunk with runs. It was fun. I saw a game a couple of days later at Edgbaston. There were 700 in, which is not great in a 25,000 capacity ground. And the bowling attack had a 16-year-old, there was a 17-year-old, there was a 19-year-old. There was a guy who missed the game, who was first choice because he was cramming for his exams, his A-levels, which were a year away. Mate, it was second 11 cricket. And that's I don't want to decry, you know, they're kids who are promising and talented, and that's great. But it was second 11 cricket. And I don't think it will prepare people to face Mitchell Starc in a World Cup match. I don't know. So on balance, I think it's a really dangerous way to have gone with the game, actually. And while it's nice that the Warwickshire attack that day was two people who had been the opening bowlers, were two guys who've been signed on 3-week contracts. 3-week contracts from club cricket. You know, and great for them. I genuinely, I'm not meaning to demean them. Talented lads. I hope they make a go of it. Brilliant. But it is not the standard required to retain a World Cup. And that will become very apparent when they, you know, again, Mitchell Stark's probably the best example I can think of, because I think he might be the best white ball bowler. He's one of the very best I've ever seen, particularly in that sort of 30 over mark. And it will not prepare them. So when people talk about other options for that sort of white ball window, the 100 window, I know Mike Atherton is a big fan of playing young players in the championship, perhaps at outgrounds. That is almost the definition of second 11 cricket. So there is no perfect solution. I mean, it's not an unreasonable one. Athers is obviously an intelligent man with a lot of experience, well-intentioned. You know, you've got to respect his view. But at the same time, there's not a perfect solution while you have a big fat block of 100 over cricket in the prime weeks of the season. So I would go back to playing, you know, the primary white ball competition, say the Blast, on Friday nights when people actually can plan for it with local variants. You know, it works at Lords or the Oval on Wednesdays or Thursdays or whatever, and also works for TV that way. And I would have championship cricket played throughout the season. I would, but you know, it seems to me that the games administrators are abandoning the longest format and preparing for life after it. I think that's a mistake. I think it's unnecessary. You know, in England, Test cricket still sells out. I still think there's a great market for it. And part of the reason for that is because it's still entertaining in England, because we use a Duke's ball and the pitches enable the bowlers to have some help. And I think that's probably very helpful in the modern game. So I don't think this stuff is unsalvageable. But I think, oh, look who turns up now. Norcross.
Yes.
Very cross.
I'm so sorry. I am almost at the end of my physical tether. But hello, people. I beg forgiveness, but you don't want to know the details.
We've only just started, Dan. We've only just started.
For that, I am genuinely eternally.
Doesn't he look more healthy? Doesn't he look more healthy than me?
What?
He does. Yes.
He looks more healthy than me. I have been coughing and spluttering my way through because I thought I thought of crying off sick.
This is water. This is how bad this is.
I thought of crying off sick, but I thought it'll be okay because Norky's there and he will talk. I'll be all right. No one will even notice I'm barely, spluttering in the background.
We'll forgive you, Dan. Darryl, we'll stop talking about Daniel now that he's here.
I just want to pick up on what George said about the 3-week contract, actually, because my concerns about that is managing the expectations of those young cricketers and how, after the three-week contract, how they're actually handled. You know, are they just pushed back to club cricket? Are they going to second 11 cricket? What's happening to them? You know, that would be my worry, that, you know, mental health is right out there in cricketing circles and other sports, obviously. But that would be a worry for me of how they would deal with those people.
Well, good for you. Good for you for thinking like that, because obviously that's a factor. But I think professional sport is brutal. I mean, it is brutal. I used to think it was the best job in the world. You know, you have this sort of vision of these guys usually in a team environment, in a dressing room environment. It looks tremendous fun. They play the sport they love. And what you don't realise is that the paranoia that is constantly biting at their shoulders, the fear of losing their contracts, the doubt and all the rest of it, it's a rubbish job, isn't it? So I'm full of awe for people who manage to do it for a long time. But you're right, yeah, it's brutal, and that's something that we probably should think about.
And George, actually, that's a really good point, because we've actually spoken to professional sportsmen in other sports, and there's one person, I won't name the person, it was relating to football, and he felt almost at the end of his tether when his professional football came to an end, because he had never sort of thought of the future. And I guess that academies, at cricket academies and in the counties, with these youngsters that are coming up, we've mentioned the youngsters that are second 11 academy cricketers. It's really important, isn't it, that their future is not neglected, and actually there's life after professional sport.
Yes, it is, and the PCA are actually quite good at that. But it's all very well. These young men and women, and I think it's particularly the men again here, they have the arrogance of youth, which you probably have to have if you're going to have a successful sporting career. You have to have incredible belief and stuff. And it's amazing how often they're surprised when it comes to an end. It is amazing, but they think they're far too young and clever for it to fail. And it as an observation, it nearly always ends sooner than they think. So
do you think
you're absolutely right? They should get other qualifications and all the rest of it. But it's all very well saying that. It's bloody difficult to go through that transition.
George, can I ask though? In large part, English cricket is very, very middle class, middle and upper middle class. There's a lot of people who go to public schools, and if they're going to enter into cricket, they sort of already have that degree of arrogance. I'd be interested to know from Jim's perspective, actually, is it like that in Australia? It seems to me to be a slightly different cricketing culture, that surprise that you're describing in English cricketers. I know it's part of having a sporting mentality, but is it also part of having a kind of educational mentality?
Well, you know what it is here, Dan, we're egalitarian in this society, have been ever since the convicts arrived, I suppose, and all those good Irishmen that came here. But yes, there's less of a stratified society, I think you'd have to say, in this country. And most of our cricketers come through the club system, not the school system. In fact, in the two major state cities of Australia, Melbourne and Sydney, not too many public school boys in the English sense who make it to the next level, mainly because when they finish school, they go and do something with their lives other than play sport. If they become professionals. Or they go, you know, as what do you say in England? They go to the city and make a quid. But yeah, I think most of our cricket comes from what you'd call middle class Australia, which is maybe a bigger middle class in its percentage of having some hands on resources than yours. I don't know. Anyway. See, football's your obsession. It is ours in the winter, particularly Aussie rules, but cricket's still our national game. And as I mentioned before in this chat, which was a bit wobbly, unfortunately, so I don't know whether what I say actually went over, but it seems to me that English cricket has really suffered a massive decline, perhaps, or at least stagnation from the time they took cricket off free-to-air television. That was the one thing you needed in the country to proselytise your game, was to have it out there. And that is why, you know, the hundreds come up and everything else is a sop to all that. So we've never had that. The legislation has never changed here. We didn't have a bloody Lord Maclaurin coming in and saying the only way English cricket can make money is to go to Sky. They've got all the dough. That's never happened here with Test cricket at any rate. It's in the legislation. It must be available to everyone. You know, that's been very important in a country of 25 million people at the other end of the earth that has a sport, its major sort of vehicle for carrying the hopes and the rest of it of a nation, and has for 150 years. So cricket is very much a part of that, and that's why you've got so many role models and the rest of it out there for young kids to aspire to be. That's why cricket continues. I mean, I can talk from a club viewpoint because I'm involved in probably the second biggest club in Australia in terms of junior participation. We have over 900 kids last year. It's kept growing from 600 5 years ago who want to come and play cricket. So, I mean, cricket's out there. I mean, it's in the brain, it's in the blood, and it's a universal middle class, if that's the expression, game. But we have a classless society here, don't we, Dan?
Well, I'm not sure you have a classless society.
No, we don't. We have a very money-oriented society. Yes.
But what I would say is that when I was out there for the Ashes in 2017-18, and I was watching a game at the ground in Sydney where they played the one-day warm-up, which was a kind of small club ground, really.
North Sydney Oval?
Yeah, that's right. And I saw kids, beautiful ground. And I saw girls playing against boys. There's this sort of grass bank behind. And it was the most natural thing in the world. You just saw like hundreds of kids that were there, almost literally hundreds, maybe 150 or so.
Yeah.
And they were just playing against each other. It didn't matter what gender they were, didn't matter what race they were, didn't matter what class they were. They were playing cricket because in Australia, cricket is that. And it isn't in Britain. And that is an enormous problem. And that's why the 100 was created, actually. It was really created to try to find people in cities, to find people in Birmingham and London and Nottingham and Leeds and Manchester, etc. And whether it was the right thing to do or any of those things, I don't know. But it was to deal with a problem that England has got, English cricket culture has got, that it doesn't attract young people from the cities. You don't see that happening. But what you see is, where I live, you see Afghans and Pakistanis and Bangladeshi, all of them English, but English, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Indians, playing on the commons, Tooting Beck Common, where I live, or Wandsworth Common, against each other or playing last man stands, but they're not integrated into the system in the same way that they are in Australia, because the game isn't as integrated into the country as it is in Australia.
And we've also got the climate for it. That's
enormously helpful. Yeah. I don't know why we invented this crazy game. But yeah.
Well, Trevor Bailey years ago, he was in our box at the MCG, and we were talking about coaching, because Australians always take the view that the Poms are too busy getting the elbow up and all the other conventions that are applied to coaching. And he just looked aghast at us and he said, "Coaching?" He said, "What you've got in this country is climate." And it's true, because you think at this stage of the season, right? They've been playing cricket for the last 6 months in Darwin, in the Northern Territory, because it's bloody hot up there in the middle of the year, as it is in Cairns and Townsville. And they're trying to get some Sheffield Shield and domestic one-day cricket into the Northern Territory, as much for the politics of border closures and everything else. And the climate's perfect up there all the year round, other than the monsoon, to play cricket. So we are blessed in many ways because of our natural conditions. That does help the playing of the game of cricket. Yeah.
And actually, I mean, just a point on that. If you look at this, is played out in women's cricket. If you look at how women's cricket was 10, 11, 12 years ago, when women weren't being paid to play cricket, they didn't hit as many balls. And now, of course, they're getting paid to play cricket. They hit a load more balls. And what do? They score more runs. They're better at cricket. They play more cricket. Simple as that.
Well, that's another dimension of the game, kind of worldwide, but certainly in Australia. The development, the professionalisation of women's cricket. And that's going to carry the game forward as much as anything else to the next generation. You only have to look at the Australian women's team and the conveyor belt of stars that they have in that side. Not just the older stars like Meg Lanning and Elise Perry, Alyssa Healy. There are so many others coming through. So that's got to be the benefit of the game. And isn't it going to be exciting? And I'm sure you'll be there next year in Birmingham to watch Commonwealth Games and the cricket that's going to be played. Women's cricket.
Can't wait for that.
I was just, I'm very conscious that we've now gone into about an hour and 25 minutes, and it's been enthralling, guys. It really has. I want to come to you, Norkers, because we did talk about the Old Trafford, the test that never was, and I'd just be interested in your views on the situation that unravelled last week.
Yeah, it's a very, very tricky one, I think, because I think that the people that we should be most concerned about are the spectators, the people who run stalls at those games, who've given away a lot of money, and have also, some of them were hoping for a vast amount of money that was going to help them, tide them through after a terrible period with COVID. What do I think really happened? I don't know. George probably knows best. I think it's actually a function of a completely dysfunctional season. When India wanted not to have that last test match, I always felt that it wasn't going to happen, because that's the way the cricket world works. And when India were playing the World Test Championship final at the end of June, I found it extraordinary that we didn't actually have a 5-test series that was pulled further back towards when that was going to happen. And if we want to play the white ball games that we did against Pakistan and Sri Lanka, that we could have played them maybe at the end of the season. I don't know. It was very difficult. It was very hard for the authorities to be agile enough to do those things. But we did ask Test cricketers to play 5 matches in 6 weeks. And then, knowing, we didn't know when the schedule was put together, but it became clear that there was going to be an IPL coming straight after it. So you can have a load of conspiracy theories, and you can say, well, it's all about the IPL, it's all about this, that, the other. It's all about Indian players not wanting to play that last test match. But really, it's a function of a completely dysfunctional summer that we have in Britain, in England. We wait for it every year. We look forward to it more than anything else. And then we look at this formless blob of madness of 7 county championship matches in 8 weeks. How insane is that? I mean, that's no way to prepare anybody except some batters. Rory Burns enjoyed it. Almost nobody else did. Bowlers certainly didn't. And then throwing a T20 tournament and saying, well, we're going to do it now. And then, then the quarterfinals will be over here. And then the final will be over there. None of it makes real sense. Test matches that happen and then stop. One-day internationals that happen and then stop. And an Indian side wandering around England for a month and a half playing no cricket from the end of June to the beginning of August. And you can say, well, they were having a great time while they were doing that. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that, yeah, and it was also, we had opened up society so much that COVID was going to happen at some point. And when it did, when it happened in their own camp, and it got closer and closer, I can understand why they were concerned about it. I don't really know what I'm saying at the end of all that, other than that COVID is a bloody mess. Cricket is a bloody mess. It's both those things. And I don't really, yes, I expected the Indian team to do what they did, but I don't blame them for it. And I expect the England team later on this year, and I'm sure George has talked about it while I was elsewhere, probably expects the England team to find it pretty tricky to go and undergo those sort of privations. So, maybe we've just got to be a little bit more forgiving of everybody, take a step back and go, well, we are in unprecedented times. We are in the middle of a bloody global pandemic. And let's take blame out of it. Let's try to work out how to do things better next time. Having 5 test matches in 6 weeks was a crazy bloody idea. And the entire organisation of the English season was a crazy idea. And in a way, they got lucky that the only thing they lost was the end of what could have been a magnificent test series.
Well, Norkers, that's the most sense that I've heard. You obviously are. You must be on water. You can't be on live because that's.
I've done a bloody drink for 36 hours, and I'm not feeling any better for it.
Dobell was drinking wine on your behalf. I wanted you to answer one of the questions in the style of the late great man that you do the fantastic impression of. But I'll come to that a bit later.
Which one? Which one? Hang on. Let's tell me. I do. Is it KP? Is it KP?
You know which one. You know which one. The one that said there was a freaker on the field.
That's a freak.
I'm not even going to try, but no, you're quite right, because George and Jim have alluded to that. And actually, you've really hit the nail on the head there, haven't you? That we are in unprecedented times. I mean, Darryl and I, throughout this year, have been trying to run just a county under-18 side. And the challenges just for that, which is a county under-18 side with 20 players, it's been enormously difficult. It's been so tough, regularly lateral flow testing players day after day. And I think you're right, because I think that we do sometimes have to take a step back, don't we? Just have that a little bit of
let's be a bit more kind. Let's be a bit more kind to everybody in their choices, because everybody's experiencing some weird stuff right now.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
They make their decisions in a very different environment, especially the ones who've just had kids. They're being dealt a whole load of nonsense on the internet about what vaccines will do to you if you're pregnant, or this, that, and the other, and what happened to your children, and that's just the virus. Before we even get to sitting around in a hotel, I mean, imagine if Graham Swan was still around. Can you imagine being in a hotel with Graham Swan for 11 weeks? I mean, the horror of that. I love the man dearly, but don't put me in a hotel with him for 11 weeks. And
Darryl had to share a hotel room with me for one day this year, and he said that was more than enough. So.
There's a Graham Swan in every team, and they've all got to sit and live with them for 11 weeks. So there'll be some people who are going a little bit mad.
We just hope that we can learn from it and move on and make some good decisions for the future, isn't it? I think that would be nice. Wes, you've been quiet for a little while. I know there's loads of questions coming in. Have you got anything in particular burning to ask the panel?
I suppose what goes a while back, earlier in the initial conversation, again from Dean Franklin, about sort of wicket keeping, really. And obviously we've seen this year with Butler and Bairstow sharing the gloves. How does picking a wicket keeper for their batting affect England's spinners, as opposed to having a specialist keeper like Kieran, you mentioned Jack Russell, Jim mentioned Bobby Taylor, Alan Knott. Do you think the spinners even appreciate having someone? I mean, I know Butler and Bairstow are top quality keepers, but do they appreciate it as much as having someone like Ben Foakes, for example?
You don't have any spinners anymore. You don't. They're all dodos. Absolute dodos. No one knows what a spinner looks like. Joe Root's your only spinner.
They just don't cook them, Jim. That's the problem.
Oh, God. What about that bloke who bowls leg spin? He looks Parkinson. He looks like he can bowl.
Oh, don't you start, Jim. Don't you start. Shane Warne's been trying to make this happen. I know what you're playing at. Someone who's going to go at 4.5 runs and over, who's never played Test cricket before, and you wanted to come. I know exactly what you're playing at.
Oh, yeah. His name could be Crane. We've seen them all. Yes, we have. That's true.
What I would say, though, is that England's worst, and most of these selection decisions are a matter of the selectors, they haven't necessarily got it wrong. It's a hard thing to do. But there was a moment when you had an insight into England selectors or their policy this year, when they picked James Bracey to bat at 7 and be keeper. I mean, that was an act of selectorial vandalism, because James Bracey is a guy who could become England have not had a batter who averages over 40 come into Test cricket since Joe Root in 2012. Ollie Pope is the next best option, and James Bracey after that, in my view, if you're looking at 21, 22-year-olds, was the next best after that. And they brought him into the side as a number 7 keeper. This tells you everything you need to know about England's selection policy when it comes to keepers. It is insane.
It has been for 50 years on and off.
Oh, it has.
Going back to Jim Parks and John Murray.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Ollie Pope, for God's sake, kept wicket in New Zealand. I mean, Jesus.
No respect for wicket keepers. No respect at all.
And do you know, Jim?
Bairstow scores more runs when he's wicket keeping than when he's not wicket keeping.
Yeah.
So I can't work that one out.
No, but I tell you what, they finally worked out who should have been keeper in the New Zealand series when they played John Simpson in the ODI series, because they'd run out of keepers. They'd run out of Folkes, Butler, Bairstow. There was nobody left. So they then picked Simpson, and do you know what? He should have played the test match. He should have played the bloody test match.
Yeah.
Instead of Bracey. Without a doubt. That was the obvious.
Jesus, you are real.
If you lose a wicketkeeper, you pick a wicketkeeper, George.
I think he was 7th choice.
Well,
Yeah.
I can't remember who else was unfit or deemed not fit.
they were all unfit, George. They were all unfit.
Ben Cox was tried before him. I can't even remember them all.
Bob Taylor would have been watching in the stand. Couldn't I got him to go out and play?
Hey!
I thought John Simpson did quite a good job, but suggesting that he should be called up for the test team's a stretch, isn't it?
Not at all. Not at all. What, instead of James Bracey, George, are you crazy? I mean, you don't take it.
They weren't the only choices, and I think didn't the Bracey thing happen first? Didn't the Bracey thing happen in the New Zealand series?
That's what I mean. They picked Bracey for the New Zealand series when they should have picked Simpson. It was absolutely clear. You just got to pick the best keeper in the country. Just pick the right keeper. Whereas the answer to your question is pick the best keeper in this country. All the best keepers can bat. Pick the best keeper.
I don't think John Simpson's the best keeper in the country, is he?
Oh, I'd say he's definitely up there.
I don't think John Simpson's mum would say that, but anyway, neither here nor there.
I say, so we're going to go with Cox. Folkes was unavailable.
Yeah.
So
I can't remember.
Well, not Bracey, George. Not Bracey. You're not picking Bracey.
Obviously not. No, he hadn't really kept. It was a ludicrous
But they picked
decision.
him.
Yeah. Somebody just questioned, is this the new England selection panel? With Jim Maxwell in there, then clearly it is, because Jim, I'm sure, would love to be involved in selecting the England team. The only thing I know about John Simpson, Dan, is one of our under-18s tried to take one of his bats when we were playing in Middlesex today. Not take, as in lift it, but he went over to beg and plead to take one of his bats, and John Simpson gave him a polite refusal. But I'm with you, Norkers. I think you pick your best keeper. I don't know whether that's John Simpson or Ben Folkes. If Folkes is uninjured and available, Ben Folkes is the best keeper in the country, in my view. Humble opinion.
I think you're right.
One person's actually mentioned about the selection team. Does that not just fall with Silverwood? Is it more? Is there more people behind the scenes? Is it Root, Silverwood, and
No. Silverwood picks the team, but there's a whole load of people who provide data. And just to put that in perspective, people saw James Bracey keeping. The data suggested afterwards he'd had a good game with the gloves. The data's pants.
It catches the ball like that.
The data is one of the great myths of our time, yeah? The idea that you could define everything. Honestly, some of the data, very helpful, always has been. You'd be a fool to ignore it. But Mike Atherton wrote a piece after that test match saying, the data suggested that actually James Bracey had a pretty good game with the gloves. Well, the data's pants then. The data suggested before the game that James Bracey had the best defensive technique in the county game. Rubbish.
Last year, Rory Burns, we were told reliably by CricViz, had an average of 78 against left arm seam bowling. And then he faced Shaheen Shah Afridi, who bowled an absolute beauty to him. A couple of times, actually.
Several times, unplayable.
And his average dropped. And what Rory Burns had was an average of 78 against left arm seam bowlers that weren't Shaheen Shah Afridi.
Graham Black.
Exactly. What the data doesn't tell you is who is the left arm seamer.
You could do anything with data. It's the same as words.
Yeah.
Reorganise them in whichever way you want. We can, make you laugh, cry, baffle you. Moeen Ali's data. You can do whatever you want with it. I could tell you that he's got a better strike rate than Jim Laker, for example, and Jim will look shocked. But the fact is, he takes wickets more often in Test cricket, fewer balls than Jim Laker.
Yeah.
He's also got the worst bowling average of anyone, I think, in the top 30 or so. Maybe Ashley Giles is in there at about 27 in the list of England wicket takers. What does that tell you about Moeen? You could argue it both ways. Got to be so careful with data. The idea that it gives you a definitive answer is hubris in the extreme.
Well, Jared Kimber has a very strong opinion on this, and it'll blow your mind. And it's basically that we're collecting data wrongly. At the moment, we're collecting balls and runs and wickets and what have you, but actually, people bowl really good balls that go for 4. We shouldn't be counting them against the bowler. We should be collecting data in a completely different way. And
you should use our eyes for a start and just watch the bloody game.
Exactly, Jim. That's
exactly
what we should be doing. Yeah.
The judgment point is very key. I mean, you don't want to be saying just ignore all this stuff, because obviously there's knowledge there. But the idea that they've suddenly invented a new way to understand and that no one's ever thought of this stuff before is just, use the same words, hubris.
Jim, I'm so happy you're on this panel, because I think you're my alter ego in Australia, because everything you said tonight is my views completely, everything, literally. Use your eyes, look at what's in front of you, see who's playing well. The thing that always bugged me a lot was seeing coaches up on the balcony with their heads in a laptop while the game was going on. Well, actually look out at the game and see what's going on. I mean, these things here that God-given, they're quite useful things to have. And I'm completely with you on that one, Jim, I have to say.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. We've got all sorts of issues with coaches. Don't start me on the one in Australia, which is full of politics at the moment. And is guaranteed Justin Langer another 6 months anyway, but I'm not sure beyond that whether he'll be invited to carry on. But it goes back to the chairman of Cricket Australia wanting to stay where he is. And they get votes from Western Australia. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, we move on. We want to talk about cricket when we can, but as Dan's missed a lot of this. I mean, as you said, it's dysfunctional, confusing. God knows what's going to be happening. We don't even know in this country what the hell's going to happen tomorrow. Because, as I mentioned, we live in a federation with about 5-6 republics. And, the seceding Western Australians, and Queensland's running its own race, and Victoria. No wonder Cricket Australia have lost any hair that they had some time ago trying to negotiate a way for the Ashes to go ahead. It's near impossible because what politicians and medical people are saying today may not be the case, for better or for worse, in a month's time. You only need another spike somewhere in Australia and everything's locked down again in that state. And that's just happened again in Victoria. They're enduring, I think, their 7th lockdown since all this COVID stuff started. So it is such a serious disruptor to our society.
Can I ask you, Jim, you may already have covered this, and I'm very sorry if you have, but given that, Scott Morrison and the government have said that 80% vaccination rates are the point at which interstate lockdowns will stop and lockdowns generally will stop.
That's what he says. That's not what the Premier of Western Australia says.
Right. So and that can continue like that, can it? That can just.
This is the nature of federation. The states have massive power to make their own decisions. That's one of the reasons why, as I mentioned before, this women's cricket series between Australia and India is being played in Queensland, because it's the only way they can guarantee at the moment that the thing can go on without there being all these restrictions that are imposed in some of the other states. And this is what you're likely to run into during the Ashes, as we did when India were here, that you may only be able to guarantee playing matches in a couple of states. This is a problem for everyone.
And is there no sense that the advancement of the vaccine program is going to liberate Australia from that position?
Yeah, that's the talk. That's the talk. We're up to about just under 50% double vax at the moment. And, you know, that'll grow to the point where, you will get a greater clamour than there is at the moment for life to resume, business to resume. But we haven't reached that point. And it may be another couple of months before that occurs. But that's not going to stop the quarantine regimen that we have in place for people coming into the country. As I was saying to George and everyone else, you know, we got 50,000 Australians overseas who can't get back to their own country. So, you know, it's an ongoing problem, and it's not going away in the next 3 months. And unless the English players are prepared to put up with some kind of quarantine, it won't happen. It just can't happen. So, you know, there's got to be ongoing wheeling and dealing and selling. And at the back end of all of this, Cricket Australia are going to lose a fortune if the Ashes is cancelled, because their whole revenue structure relies on the Channel 7 contract and Foxtel. So, yeah, that's where we are or aren't at the moment in terms of what's coming up. Yeah,
really sad times, isn't it? Actually,
it is.
Of not having
it's very distressing, and it's not good for anyone's mental health, including aging cricket commentators locked up in their apartment.
Hey, it's much the same for middle-aged cricket commentators locked up in the darkness of an English winter. I can tell you that, Jim.
Oh, well, I hope you're coming out here, Dad and George. It'd be nice to see you in Australia, if you can get in.
Well, that's the plan. I think George has got a better route in than I have. I think he thinks you can sidle in via New Zealand, can't you, George?
No, not anymore. I mean, I've got a New Zealand passport, Jim, but I think that that particular route has been closed. I was relatively confident there's talk of an exemption for journalists, but I need a job, Jim. So that's my issue right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, look, we all need a job. What are we doing here? Are we trying to get Jim to get us jobs in Australia? Jim,
that would be good.
Can you get us a job?
Come and do some broadcasting. George, you've done. Weren't you doing some broadcasting?
Wasn't I doing what? Sorry.
SEN?
Yeah.
Oh yes, I was. Yeah,
it's a deal.
Yeah.
Jim, I did my year's working holiday for ABC in Australia in the year 2000. I did 6 months for ABC and 6 months with Win News, so I've got a bit of experience there. So put a good word in for me, you know, and I can come back and promise.
Housing costs are strong, though. I think we're all coming to stay with you, Jim. That's the idea.
Housing! Don't talk about housing. Oh, you got to be a multi-millionaire to buy anything in this country now. Oh dear, it's gone crazy.
Oh,
Everything's gone crazy.
Dan can buy us all a house then, Dan.
Presumably the hotels are empty, no? Aren't they?
There's
no one in any of the hotels, presumably, Jim.
Well, yeah, they are empty. Apart from people who are stuck in there on 2 weeks quarantine.
That's our future.
Oh, God.
I was just thinking about our catchphrase on the Masked Cricketer, that we don't just throw this together. Well, we really do. So I'm not quite sure we would get a gig down under, to be honest, Kate, to be perfectly honest. But, I mean, we could go on all night. This is absolutely fantastic.
Well, maybe you better have another one in a month's time, and we might know more or we might know less about the Ashes. The other thing, of course, we talked about spectators and how they've been cheated through all this because no one cares about them. What about English supporters coming to Australia? I mean, that is a vital part of our summer economy, and when the Ashes are on, is having all these friends of cricket from England, from the United Kingdom.
Army.
Well, that's fraught, isn't it? I can't imagine any confidence in selling that idea to the Barmy Army and the rest of them at the moment.
Yeah. It's something that baffles me slightly because Australia has just been the recipient of 3 million vaccines from the United Kingdom, So they're vaccinating their own people with the vaccines that the British have used on themselves, and yet they don't say, well, if the British can prove that they've been vaccinated, they might as well just join Australian society. It's a curious position that Australia's government finds itself in, and it's one that looks like it cost them a lot of money and cost us a really good Ashes.
Yeah, well, it's the politics of fear is the other side of it. And that's why Mr. McGowan in Western Australia has a massive mandate as a result of his landslide win in the last election, because of the politics of fear. And they have got no cases in Western Australia, and that is why they've closed the border to everyone else, because they don't want to be contaminated by those people from over east.
But Jim, Western Australia's always tried to be independent. This is the first move. It's the first big major move in declaring independence.
If you really want to get those over west people going, just say, do you remember April the 8th, 1933? You know what happened on that day?
Was that the start of the Ostrich War, when Australia lost a war against the Emu War? Was it the Great Emu War?
No, that was the day. That was the day they had a plebiscite, and the West Australians decided to secede from the Commonwealth. Right, 2-1. The vote was 2-1 in favour, but they had to get the approval of the federal government to do so, and it didn't happen. But that's the state of mind. This is a divided, polarised country. Apart from tyranny of distance and all the other stuff,
Do you know what? If you check Wikipedia now, anyone who's listening to this now, if they now put in Great Emu War into Wikipedia, what they will find is a war between Australia and emus, and it took place almost entirely in Western Australia. And I think, Jim, that this may have happened in 1933 because of the failure of Greater Australia to defeat the emu population. Because if you check out that war, anybody here now, if you're doing it, K-Dog, take a look on Wikipedia. You will find it says protagonists, Australian Army, led by, Bruce Shillingford. Enemies, emus. Winners, emus. The emus won the Great Emu War, and it is it happened just after Bodyline, 32-3. So Australia had gone to a terrible, terrible calumny. They'd been defeated in the Bodyline series, and then straight after being defeated by Jardine, they were defeated by emus. And I don't think the country ever truly recovered. Is that fair, Jim?
Well, it probably, yeah. I think all those emus turned into politicians, didn't they?
Now that's ostriches, because they put their heads in the sand, don't they?
England have to pick a side heavy with emus in this Ashes series. It's the only way that England have a chance of winning.
Jim, you put an idea into our minds that now that we know this does work, we might well. It's been the most watched we've ever had, which was not surprising. We've had so many questions, we haven't managed to get to them all. So possibly maybe a slightly shorter one after we know a little bit more next month would be good. I think we've got a couple of quick fire questions here. I'm conscious, Darryl, that we're getting close to an hour, 2 hours rather. So,
2 hours, yes.
It's longer than an episode of Endeavour, and I'm so sorry, by the way, but yeah, it might need to end quite shortly before I need to flee again.
We actually thought, because you were still talking on our Masked Cricketer show from months back. That's why we thought we weren't here. I'm going to end. There's a really nice comment that's come in, which I'm going to close on at the end of it. Right at the end, we've got our youngest viewer. He said to me right at the start he was supposed to be revising tonight, but he decided to sit up and watch the entire show, and he's still up. It's 11:30 at night. It's not Wes, no. It's not Wes. It's a lad who's, I think he's 15. He's revising for GCSE exams, and he made a really, really nice point that we'll close on a little bit later, but just in a few minutes' time. But Darryl, I don't know if you've got any more that you wanted to raise first in terms of what a great night it's been, and we managed to make do without Norkers for an hour, but
I am so sorry.
you've made up for it, Dan. It's been fine. It's been absolutely fine.
No, I with trepidation, I come to you for quick fire questions. They normally last quite. They're not quick fire.
Do you want me to do the quick? Do you want me to do the quick fire questions now?
Let's get that over with. Yeah.
It's just a few. I mean, it's a few actually, just relating to a few bits of breaking news today, and it's just a couple of viewers have just asked for thoughts on Lasith Malinga retiring and thoughts on Virat stepping down as the India T20 captain. So they are quite quick fire. I mean, just thoughts on, first of all, just go around the panel. Lasith Malinga, a true legend of Sri Lanka, finally decided to hang up his boots, and I'm sure that a lot of batsmen will be keen to no longer see those toe-crushing Yorkers. So down Lasith Malinga, legend or not a legend for you?
For me, Lasith Malinga is extraordinary. He's part of a kind of myth about Sri Lankan cricket. And it is a sort of, well, is it a myth or is it a legend? I don't know. That Sri Lankan cricket is happy to allow unorthodoxy to prevail throughout its game more than anywhere else. And there couldn't be a more unorthodox bowler in our lifetimes. I would say our, George and mine. Jim may remember, I don't know, like Jack Iverson or something, but he was just something completely different, wasn't he? And so you were always mesmerised by watching him, in much the same way as you're mesmerised by watching Steve Smith, actually, when he first starts batting, and because the technique is so unusual and what they try to do is so unusual. I don't know that I'll miss him, because I thought had retired about 2 years ago, to be honest with you, because I've not seen him anywhere in the last 24 months. But yeah, I mean, there are some incredible moments. I think the undercutting slower ball with your arm at a vertical, virtually to your hip, and you make a slower ball Yorker land on someone's toes in a white ball game is a skill that, if someone else can replicate it, good luck. It's unbelievable.
Well, you saw my bowling action in the charity match. That's kind of what I do.
Yeah, well, that was an abomination, K-Dog, if you don't mind me saying so. Yeah, and your failure to actually to land it was significant.
Thank you very much, Jim. Your thoughts on Lasith Malinga finally hanging up his boots?
Yes, well, I'm a bit with Dan. I thought he'd retired a couple of years ago. But anyway, he was unique, freakish, all those things. He added so much to the quality of the game, particularly. Did he get 4 wickets in 4 balls in 2007 against South Africa? Yeah. I reckon he's one of the more frightening bowlers in terms of your, not your body, but your stumps surviving the first and second ball that you face that I've ever seen. Because of that unique action he had and ability to move the ball at Yorker length. Absolutely amazing. In fact, when you think about it, why haven't more people tried to imitate his style? Because it's been so effective. We probably haven't seen a bowler like that since, I don't know, Alfred Min in the mid-19th century. Because
it's so bloody difficult, Jim.
Yeah. Well, you know, when cricket started to move from underarm to sidearm and then overarm bowling. Yeah, I'm sure there were a few umpires who are happy he's retiring, because he bloody near stiff-armed a few with that action of his, didn't he, when he got close to the stumps. Yeah, remarkable cricketer, and added so much to the game in the way, of course, Muralitharan did with his unique triple-jointed spin bowling action. Yeah, so yeah, it is sad, but yeah, it's surprising there hasn't been greater imitation. Yeah.
And George, I know that you've been much travelled as well. An unusual unorthodox action, something that maybe England coaches tend to try and coach unorthodox actions out of players, but he was a bit of a world beater, wasn't he?
I'm struggling to hear a little bit, but I think that was about Malinga, wasn't it? And equally the same, I think I heard Jim say something similar about Murali. And yes, there is a reminder there about the benefits of being unorthodox. I think that Brian Lara used to talk about one of the reasons he was so good at playing spin was because when he was growing up in Trinidad, there were very few rules about actions. And so he faced people who turned the ball with unconventional actions, and he learned to play the turning ball on tricky wickets and all the rest of it. There is a lot to remind ourselves there about the benefits of unorthodoxy, yes.
Brilliant stuff. And this is my final one, Daryl. This is my very quick fire question. This is on the assumption that the Ashes go ahead. So we're just going to forget that COVID exists, and we're going to assume the Ashes is going to go ahead. And I just really want just predictions from each and every one. I think if it goes ahead, it's going to be potentially 4-1 or 5-0 Australia, I'm afraid. What's your thoughts?
What?
Oh,
You want a completely objective opinion on this, do you?
I want an objective opinion, yeah.
Oh, it's 5-0.
You can give Glenn McGrath a call, Jim, if you want, and find out what he thinks it will be, because I think we know.
No, you can't take 20 wickets at the MCG. It's the worst Test match wicket in the world, and frankly, I think Melbourne should probably be struck off the list of available Test venues for producing the worst Test wicket in the world.
So India won
for years and years and years. Well, yeah, India may have won, but that was largely because of Australian ineptitude, Jim, as you know. So I think it'll be 4-0 because I think basically a blind dog can bat at Melbourne and not get out for the first 4 days.
Well.
So that's 4-0 to Australia.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not insane. Okay, dog. I may be slightly under the weather, but I'm not a lunatic.
Well, Wes has just said 4-1's optimistic for me, so I'm going to go with Wes now. What's your thoughts, Wes, if it goes ahead?
5-0, no question, for Australia.
God, I'm more of a pessimist. Pessimist.
That's optimistic. I think there are some people who believe Australia can win 6-0 in a 5-match series.
Who's going to win the one-day series? That everyone's getting excited about that too, aren't they?
That'll be England. That'll be England all day long. But, yeah, George, I know you've been very sniffly and unwell. We're really grateful you stuck with us. Your thoughts on that, and also, what are your plans for the future? We have been asked. I have avoided the question, but prediction for the Ashes if it goes ahead, and what's your future look like? That's not a very quick fire question, but people have asked. They're very keen to know.
I'm just hoping that I'm spared whatever. Being cold doesn't really do justice to the beast I'm battling terribly bravely. Yeah, I'd just like to feel better, and then maybe find a job there if anyone will employ me. 1 or 2 encouraging phone calls. We'll see what happens.
That was, by the way,
in terms of the Ashes, by the way, I think the chance was that a come and get me plea.
There was a come and get me plea in classic Sky Sports football parlance. That was a come and get me plea. So if there's anybody out there who wants to come and get
I
George,
don't think it was actually. I might take a holiday. I might reinvent myself as a sculptor. I mean, I've got no talents, so I would probably carry on writing about cricket, because what the hell else would I do?
That's a come and get me plea.
I was just about to offer you, George. I was just about to offer you Wormsley on Saturday. We may as well mention it. We're an Oxfordshire-based show. Wormsley on Saturday, Oxfordshire County Finals Day. We need a co-commentator. So if you're at a loose end, there you go. That's your. I know that you're at a wedding, Norkers, so you're out of it.
I'm in theory at a wedding. I'm supposed to be doing a reading, and I can't think of anything that I'd like to do less right now. But yeah,
because Wes has stood us up. Norkers, Wes has stood us up on Saturday, so we are a commentator, sure, because Wes has decided rather than covering the county finals day, he's going to go and do the T20 blast instead.
Oh well, congratulations, Wes! Fantastic. Genuine congratulations. Well done. Enjoy it. I'm mind you, thinking about it, maybe you should be at Wormsley.
I don't get paid for Wormsley. That's the tricky thing.
Don't go to Wormsley. Don't go to Wormsley.
I would have bought you a drink, Wes. I'd have opened my wallet and bought you a drink. There you go.
No, you would.
Guys, look, we've gone over the 2 hours, so I am going to wrap things up. But a huge thank you to Jim Maxwell for joining us from down under. You managed to get that technology working at the end, Jim, and you came across loud and clear and superb as always. So thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate your time early in the morning over there. A beautiful.
It's not.
It's not now. It's almost past breakfast time now. But anyway, I'll let Dan go and have his scotch on the rocks.
That's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
No.
And George to have his medicine or a Bailey's or whatever he needs.
I think it's a hot
Just going
toddy.
to curl up in a fetal position and rock.
I've got to have a coffee to wake up.
Very, very nice to see you all.
I've got Pepto-Bismol
Nice
and the
to see you
mint
all.
tea is my plan for the rest of the evening. It was lovely to see you all. Yeah, and
Lovely to
Jim,
have you.
great to see
Thank
you.
you very much for organising a kind of reunion chat. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and they got no idea about the Ashes because we haven't got any bloody idea what it's going to happen either.
I mean, there's so many nice comments coming in on all three of you guys. So, again, a big thank you, George, for joining us.
Yeah.
And struggling through. So thank you very much, and being as honest and forthright as you have
I
been.
must do.
Really.
Right.
And obviously to you, Norkers, for joining us. It's just,
Well,
really
I'm
great.
sorry. I'm sorry it was late. It's always a joy to be with you, and it's lovely to see, both all of you on the top of my screen, and to see Jim and to see George again. But yeah, I must, if you don't mind, get back to a vigil in my lavatory.
Oh, I see.
Lovely.
Well, it's better, Dan. It's better to be late than posthumous.
Guys, just one final word from me before we wrap this up. This kind of sums up why we do all this and our love for cricket. The young man that I told you about, who has been up all night, he's just said a couple of things. He's a 15-year-old lad, and first of all he said, "Thank you so much for imparting your great knowledge." He said, I don't know if my teachers are going to be very happy with him in the morning, that he stayed up so late and he's done no revision. But I think that's a really nice comment. So that's a young man by the name of Felix who's watched, he hasn't fallen asleep, he's watched all 2.5 hours of it. So I think it's really important, isn't it, that we doff our cap to youngsters that are into the game, young cricketers, 14, 15-year-old kids that love the game of cricket and they love it as much as we do, and as long as we can produce cricketers that are going to go on, that's the future of our sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
True. Yeah.
Guys, amazing evening. Thank you very much. One big announcement from myself and K-Dog is that the Masked Cricketer returns, and the date to put in your diary, guys, is the 7th of October. 7th of October is the start of the new series. We're going for 4 episodes. There'll be a little bit of break while I go to the Caribbean and play some cricket. I've got that in, of some over 50s tour. And then we'll come back another 4 episodes in November, December time. So look out for that. There will be some promos. We will try and get another Pundits Panel in the next month or so, and try and get these guys back on to impart their wisdom, and hopefully we know a little bit more about the Ashes at that stage. So thanks again, everybody. Our thanks to K-Dog and Stato Spearman for bringing in all the questions and making it as professional as we possibly could. So thanks, everybody, for watching. Take care, and we'll see you soon on the Pundits Panel, the guys that put pun into pundits. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.